Well, I'm here with Paul Garthwaite, and we're going to have a bit of a session, and we're going to be talking about some very interesting things, as you can see in the title. And before we begin, I would just love to be able to thank the few people who was able to assist me in regard to groceries. You know who you are. Thank you so much. Greatly appreciated. So, what are we going to discuss here today, Paul?
Well, the sun.
The sun.
Yeah.
Um, what about the sun?
Well, what are your thoughts on it, Randy?
Well, the question in mind here is, what is it? Actually, what is the sun? How does it function? And in contrast to the uh, propaganda, I'll say that because there's theories behind it in regard to the sun being a ball of fusion, a burning, flaming ball in the sky. But is it really that? So we're going to take a look at that and try to comb through this pretty quickly because we're limited on time. Um, so there isn't an inside structure to the sun. It's a photosphere. Okay. And when you look into the definition for photosphere, we're talking about a shell, the outside of something. Okay. However, before I get too far ahead of myself here, one of the reasons why I started going down this path of looking at this is because of a video that I had done months ago pertaining to scalar wave manipulation and that of quantum vector space-time manipulation. I don't know how long it's been. It's been quite a few months that I put that video out. And I had certain questions on how this works, and I had a vague idea, and I tried to describe it the best that I could based on what I understood. And this is kind of another piece of the puzzle that came into or crossed my path here recently, and it had to do with a interview that I had listened to of Nikola Tesla. I don't know if it's a real interview or not, but all I can tell you is that it was very interesting. And there was one thing that was said within that interview that perked my ears up. And that was that Nikola Tesla said that he could create a second sun. And I go, it just like light bulb went on. And then something else crossed my path at the same time, probably a day later. And it's like, so that's the subject matter for this at this point. So, what is the sun? Okay, first of all, there isn't any inside structure to the sun. It's a photosphere, and it isn't producing nuclear fusion. It is acting as a transformer of frequency and voltage. This is voltage and electrical conversion. That is converting the principal force to a secondary force, and the surface of the sun produces the emission of the energy in the form of waves or particles, one and the same, depending how you look at it, that interacts with the physical matter, and this generating the electromagnetic light spectrum. So, what is the principal force? That is a huge question, and that's something that it's not something to cover within this time frame, because that's a huge question. Okay. But we can look at it in regard to how carrier waves can move through a transmission of the principal force. Okay. If we look at like a television transmission, you can overlay other carrier waves as well as overriding the initial frequencies transmitted. This appears to be what is occurring with the crystal network structures pulsing out frequency code sequences, which appears to be emanating from the pole star in the constellation of Draconis. So, sun conversion, right? So once the emission interacts with physical matter, it reverts or should I say, it reverts to reduced form, which is heat, light, and mechanical activity. So, is there anything that you want to add to that, Paul, or ask questions, bring up? Because this is a good time.
Yeah, absolutely. I would um so in this respect then, so I know we that's a question for another time, but in terms of heat from the sun then, how is that produced?
Yeah, well, it's not being produced by the sun specifically. It's being produced within the atmosphere of the body that we're resident of. The technical aspect of it. I don't have that under my belt as of yet, but there is a, it's really stems on the word of conversion. Um, Again, which was mentioned there, that the emission that is being produced from this object, what we call the sun, interacts with the physical matter. Okay. It reverts to or reduces it. It reduces its form. This is the conversion aspect of it. Okay. It's like a transformation of the energy that relates to the atmosphere of the body, the earth, which is the the reduced form is the heat, the light, and mechanical activity. Does that does that help answer?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
So in terms of then distance from the earth, d- is it
Yeah, that's you can't. Yeah, that okay. Very interesting. You're going in the direction of measurement of light, right?
yeah.
There is
Mm,
no such thing based on this. That whole theory collapses because of what this is. Light isn't something that the only way that you can measure light is on the earth. You can't take that off world and measure with it because there is you energy how energy in free space is immeasurable because you can't see the sun in free space. You can see bodies, earth, moon, whatever, okay? Because the conversion takes place on the body. You can see the sun when you're on the body, but when you're in free space, you can't see it because
okay.
there's no conversion there, because there's no matter, right? So if you can't see the sun in free space, then the conversion isn't complete until it hits, as the example, Earth's atmosphere or a physical object, then it converts to electromagnetic light.
So in terms of eclipses, that that that
Yeah, that's something else completely different now, isn't it? But here again to emphasize that your perception, you obviously we can see what we call the sun here.
mm,
That's because of the conversion. But if you go out again, if you go out in free space, there is no stars and there is no sun because there's no conversion within free space. The conversion takes place on a body.
right.
So light
Mm,
isn't what light is made out to be. There isn't any, you can't measure distance with light within this model because everything collapses.
mm.
You can see physical bodies, that is, planets, Earth, and Moon, but not the light source. It's only the light source is only visible when gross matter is involved, such as the Earth's atmosphere.
Mm.
This is why, from a planetary body, like I just said, we can see it and feel what is being produced in and on the Earth and its atmosphere. The atmosphere and the conditions on the body determines the experience of heat, mechanical activity, and the perception of light. So light is only present within material objects. This means that there is no time delay, and the measurement of light in free space is meaningless.
Mm.
There is no such thing as light years. So when one refers to light years as a measurement of distance in free space, know that this is a bogus indoctrination. And what is the reason for it being bogus? Why is the indoctrination bogus? Because everything you see here is under the thumb of being using a coin slot. We'll go back to the idea of electricity being utilized and how Tesla was looking to free that up where everybody could access, and had done that within particular areas in certain towns. He configured it in ways so people could have access to that. And it's a simple technology, really. It really is. But there was no coin slot related to that. So he got shut down. He always, majority of his innovations, his designs, his things that he came up with for the benefit of humanity was confiscated and taken to use for the detriment of a twisted consciousness, you know. And so it's bottom line is looking at this world in regard to the propaganda, the indoctrination, the not mistaken idea of perception of what reality is, but a deliberate thwarting and misdirection of what the truth is. Because here's the thing, in real science, they know this. Do they know what the sun is? No, but they know how it works. This is the reason why Tesla said he could create a new one.
So,
welcome to Prison Planet, motherfuckers.
yeah, no, I agree.
Can I cuss, Paul? Because I'll
Of
cuss
course,
I'll cuss.
of course.
I had a hard time last night, and I'm
Yeah.
not, I'm not going to refrain from that. I had a very difficult time last night because of me wanting to present this.
So, in terms of what, where do you think we would be now if Nikolai Tesla hadn't been suppressed?
Well, we would be in the same place that we were before, maybe not before, but an equal place
Hmm.
of Tataria.
Mm. Yeah.
I mean, tyrants rule this world, you know?
Oh,
And when we
yeah.
start looking at time zones and everything, that's bullshit too, obviously. Time
Mm.
zones is based on particle spin rate. It has nothing to do with anything other than controlling. Well, this gets a bit complicated, and I don't really understand it very well. But the idea of manipulation of time space in itself, the reconfiguration of quantum vector location, and how you can alter it. And again, we'll go back to the idea of how with and through the sun, this object that we call the sun can have these carrier waves, frequencies being transmitted in order to affect space time and how things work here. One of the, I mean, this is another subject to go into because it will take quite a bit of time, but there's certain analogies that you can use an example to, as far as particle spin rate. You can look at it from the perspective of a merry-go-round. You know
Mm.
how when you spin on a merry-go-round, the centrifugal force is greater at the outside of the merry-go-round. And in the
Yeah.
middle of it, it feels like you're in a neutral space and you don't feel that centrifugal force. Well, that's a perfect example to particle spin, because you can see the different aspect of time zone and how it relates, quote unquote, with how one is positioned geographically and also within lifespan. Yeah,
So,
that's another subject. I don't want to really go into that at this point because that really requires a preface, which would end up leading into what initially what I've started off here with in regard to the sun. I
mm.
thought that aspect is more important. This is something that needs to be continued to be covered. You know, it's not a theory. It just needs to be presented in a way as a model,
Mm.
because people go, well, prove it. Well, prove that the sun is a ball of fusion. You can't, because the idea of the electromagnetic structure system, okay, for lack of terms, I'll put it that way. You see that within this world everywhere, in everything. It's how everything works. So why would it be any different? It's not. And that's, again, I'll go back to Tesla. You know, I think he's smarter than both of us and everybody else that's listening put together, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. He said he could create a new sun. How was he able to do that? It was based on what he already knew. I mean, the whole reason for the Tesla globe was to be able to observe how high frequencies work within real time. It
Mm.
was a tool. In but at the same time, it was also a model in order to be able to create something from which he did, you know. Again, I'm going into areas that I'm not very familiar with, but the point is that if he said he can create a second sun, it can't be that complicated. So it's not the way all this the way that it's been presented at all. And the more that you see, more of these things, more of this reality opens up to you, and more of the pieces of the puzzle comes into it. You start to dismiss those things, that indoctrination that pre-existed. And again, to emphasize, why is it there? Why is that indoctrination there? It's to keep you under the waterline, to keep you
Yeah.
consciously naive and dumb you down so that you can be controlled. And so this is not just a world thing. This obviously is an off world thing. And even more so, we've got to start going into a cosmic matrix. That's another subject. And it gets it goes deep. This is a
Of
very,
course.
very, very deep well. There's, as far as I can see, there is no bottom to it.
Mm.
And I know enough to where it gets a bit overwhelming for me sometimes,
It's
you
well,
know, but
it's a yeah, it's a
it's important
huge.
one thing at a time. We have to be aware of and question things, not just out of, frustration or anger. That's not really productive, but question things in order to search and discern within ourselves and help one another to find the answers so that we can be supportive to the truth for real freedom, actual freedom.
So in
And we've had the technology here for the longest time, Paul, that everybody
yeah.
should be, nobody should be paying anything for anything.
Mm.
But we haven't reached a place of conscious awareness to where we would be responsible for within that.
So a question I've got for you, Andy, about this is that where does the Particai for anyone watching the season
Well,
of
that's the
conscious?
math.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Okay.
more
Yeah.
than that.
Mm.
If I explained this before, it's more than that because
Mm.
everything's conscious. But fundamentally, you could just say it's math. It's like Yildibar, the god of this harmonic universe.
So
Okay,
yeah. Right.
that
Yeah.
being took the math and made it what it wanted to make it. It's a distorted. It has nothing to do with divine order. It's
Mm.
a complete distortion.
Mm.
And that's another subject matter. Again, we're going into the cosmic matrix. We're talking about overlords. We're talking about controllers, whatever names you want to give them, archons, whatever. It doesn't
Mm.
matter what it is, whatever name, doesn't make any difference. It's understanding what it is and
Mm.
understanding uh, what exists here.
Mm.
And because it's a consciousness construct, you can find your own path as long as you know yourself. If you don't know yourself, you're going to be put through you'll be put to task.
Aspect.
When,
What would you suggest people to do with this information? In what how could they incorporate it into their
right. So
into their
we're
being?
talking about knowing self in the
Mm.
process, looking to be free.
Mm.
Well, freedom comes through um, not just knowledge, but discernment and inner knowing. You know, who and what you are transcends all of creation. And when you have any let's go back to the attachments because attachments is the hugest thing. It's one of the hugest things. Whether it's family, whether it's legacy, whether it's like, oh, I wasn't able to live my dreams and blah, 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 blah. Okay. I mean, these things I've been dealing with myself for some time, the dream part of it, whatever you call it, whatever you want to call it. And now I'm at this stage. It's, I'm going to try to be clear about this. It's hard to talk about this and so I'm just going to go with it. What I found within myself is because I don't even really want to play instruments or music anymore. I just don't want to even do it. True. Not because I didn't like it or I didn't love it. I just don't care anymore. But here, is it because I don't care anymore that I'm disconnected from it. I don't have an attachment to it, so to speak, relating to my dream or whatever and all this other stuff here. Okay. Or have I flown from that cage into another one? What do I mean by that? Have I moved myself from this into a place now of resentment that I'm not really addressing? Because it's the same thing. It's in just another cage. It's still attached. You see what I'm saying? A lot of these things are under the waterline for us. If you, especially for men, they can be so bogged down and burdened down to where you stop feeling everything. But it's still recessive. It's still there, but you may not feel it. You may not be able to address it directly because you're numb, you know. Um, for some people, I've heard this expression, out of sight, out of mind. It's never out of mind. It's just now subconscious, you know, and you're going to have to deal with it either way. So it's not an easy answer to give in regard to the bigger significance of it. But as far as how this information or anything that's related is becomes a practical thing, well, know that the majority of everything that you've come to know is something you need to question. Question even the very things that you believe to be true based on your own experiences. If you're not willing to test and question your own experiences, then you're missing out on something huge, and that is the transcendence of identity. Because if you don't question your experiences, and just because you have profound experiences, I've had profound experiences, very extremely profound experiences. Do I question those? Yes. Did it take quite a while for me to get to the place to be able to question that? Yes. But you have to. So you have to question everything. Not like a skeptic looking for, with smugness, but looking for the truth. And the truth resides within you, that is transcendent of this identity or anything to do with it. The reason for being in manifest reality encompasses quite a few things. But in a nutshell, to summarize it, it's the way in which you experience self differently, which means you are not this. Mm. And the only way to reintegrate, such as the example I've been using in regard to going home, I want to go home. I'm ready to go home. Am I really? Because attachments will not allow you to go home of any sort. Because going home, what does that mean? It means reintegration, going back to your first state that you were prior to coming into manifest reality. So that's the reason for affirmations. You can use the words, that don't mean nothing. But the words, if you use the words in context to your intent and will, then it does have meaning. So answering this in the way that you're presenting and how it can be practical, I don't have an answer for that. All I know is that either you're seeking the truth or you're not. And if you look to be skeptical, fine, be skeptical. But if you're being skeptical just because you want to maintain the world that you're in within your own mind and the world that you're created with inside yourself, that's a projection that you experience daily, I don't want to hear about it. That's none of my business.
It's that we talked about this in the past. That would you say the truth is hidden in plain sight?
It always is. The idea is to it. Can I give an analogy for this? Because a lot of people are within a hypnotic spell, and I can give you an example for that. When I was abducted, when I was 12 years old, there was a part of me that disappeared for years and years and years and years. And this is how I likened it unto what occurred with me. It paints a picture. Think of yourself of having the home that you're in right now. And perhaps at one point you had a library that you'd go in there and you would sit and you would read and, whatever. But you had information there. Now let's think of that as being part of you in a compartmentalization. You have a room that you have a certain amount of information within you. Okay. Just painting a picture. All right.
Mm.
Excuse me. I'm painting a picture. So at one day, something happens where it's like you don't go in that room anymore. Next thing you know, you don't even see the door anymore. Now the room doesn't exist. It's there, but it doesn't exist for you. And this is a lot of what you have here. You know, you can call it blank slated, whatever you want to call it, but at the same time, what's been going on here consistently has been a resetting of things, and there's a resetting of people's ability to be able to remember things as well as to have a perception of what the reality is.
Mm.
And so, therefore, yes, truth is in plain sight, but they can't see it, and only a few do. And the ones that few do that do see it buck against the program system, and they're treated like what you see in the Matrix. That's a good example of that, where anybody can become a Mr. Smith.
Well,
And
that
I've seen that happen in real time, which is so interesting. You can see that where all of a sudden something will enter into somebody, and they'll just, and they're not able to see the truth if they endeavored with all their might,
we
because they're just completely controlled. The person that was there before is no longer home.
you've just actually touched on my question. Next question around it is that some of the things we've been talking about are portrayed kind of in Hollywood films, and what
Oh yeah, that's
so
part of the that's part of the release in
mm,
regard to what it's funny because there's this idea that if you release certain information, regardless of how you released it, it denotes you from any imprint connecting yourself to it. That's another word for karma, and that's not true. That's because they don't understand how karma works. Karma is an electrical imprint. Everything is being recorded. Anything that
yeah,
you do, any act, anything that you participate in, it's creating momentum. It's creating an energetic exchange. It's creating an attachment. It's creating cording to whatever it may be. So that's just a delusion that they have. But what they'll do is they'll look to present stuff, and people have come across by saying, "Oh, this is soft disclosure." Well, I don't believe in that. The reason why is because that's bullshit. Why is it bullshit, Randy? Well, I'll tell you why. This is my perception of it, because it's simple. If you take something and you don't make an announcement with it, where you're just being clear about it, nothing to hide, there's a whole lot behind that. Most people don't want to do that because there's consequences to it. So instead, you take a medium such as art,
mm,
entertainment, and you filter it through that. What you're doing is you're discrediting everything that you're saying, because what it's going to be received as is fantasy. It's not going to be perceived as real.
mm,
So there is no soft disclosure. That's horseshit. It's
yes,
just another way of control. Because look at anybody within the sci-fi community, and they're smart, but they're also very extremely naive, because what they see it as fantasy, and they do not understand the realities behind what they're talking about at
mm,
all. They don't think it exists. It's
And
hard enough here, and especially when you start to understand not just the truth, but experience it and come to know it very directly and personal, to where you're attacked because of beings not wanting you to say things. You can't stand to listen to that stuff, but it's prevalent. And that's the problem with the idea of soft disclosure. It's horseshit. Again, to go back initially, what I was referring to, it's important for you to know. It's not important for you to believe anything.
mm,
And knowing is an internal reality. And you're not going to get answers outside of you. You can see mirrors and images and reflections that help spark you, but don't get caught up in the phenomenon that may come along with it.
mm,
And while you're here, co-create. Okay, but stand in the gravity of your own shoes, And I would encourage those not to channel anything. Please don't do that. Don't invite angels in and stuff like that. Don't do that. Please don't do that. Don't do that.
Mm.
And I know there's plenty of people out there in there. You got to understand it's like flying from one cage to the other. It's like, well, I'm in bliss. I'm in this. None of that. I've experienced so much here. None of that eventually made any sense to me within my core.
Mm.
When I was first bedridden, I had this deep knowing about something that I couldn't really, like, there's no way to put it into words or anything like that. It was so elusive, but I could feel it. And within that was a sense of who I was truly. And it had nothing to do with this world, had nothing to do with the emotions, had nothing to do with all the things that people experience here, it had nothing to do with it whatsoever. Not even nothing close to it. And what most people expose themselves to here and become connected to is based on the way that they feel. And I know I've spoken about the idea of feeling and
Mm.
how important it is, but it's not the way that you come to know what feeling is within this world. It's not the same thing. The feeling that I had transcended everything here. So there's no way to relate it to a feeling here. I use the word feeling figuratively.
Mm.
Okay. And anytime I'm referring to feeling, that's what I really mean by it. So unfortunately, I have a tendency to speak in innuendo, and I leave a lot of things out a lot of times because a lot of this has been played out in my head quite a bit
Mm.
to the point where it doesn't play out anymore. And so I'm kind of like an autopilot, and then I'll say certain things and I'll leave words out, I'll leave meaning out because it runs deep.
Yeah.
And and another reason why I don't really care for doing videos, I don't really care for um even live streaming that much because there's really not a connection to people who may be watching that well.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not good at reading the thing and doing what I'm doing. I'd have to navigate too much, and I'm too far away from the computer, and it would be nice to have somebody there to do that, but
Mm.
I don't have that. So it just still makes it difficult for me to do because there's still degrees of separation. There's not an interaction where I can define myself clearly because I don't know how people are interpreting what I'm saying. So I end up falling into these uh, states of being where I'm just kind of like going, I'm on autopilot. And again, to emphasize, I leave a lot of stuff out. So it can be reinterpreted based on what I'm saying, which isn't what I mean, you know?
Mm.
And that's been conflicting with me. I'm very complicated and I'm kind of tired of being in this world and having to repeat myself over and over and over and over and over again. I
Yeah.
sound like a madman, you know, and I feel like one too. That's the reason why I would sound like one. But yeah,
I think I think it's what you've spoken about today is incredible, and it can be incredibly motivating for people watching it because the idea of questioning everything is not a common, in my opinion, a common attitude that people have. They just take, I mean, and I think that to question stuff and not as you say, not in a negative way, but to know to from the point of view of learning more, I think is
well,
something that everyone can take away that from this.
yeah, yeah. I'm sorry for interrupting you, Paul. I've been doing that here throughout this, and I don't mean to. I'm so rapid fire right
Mm.
now. I just can't help myself. It's my body can't keep up with what's going on inside me. So I apologize for that. I don't
No.
mean to interrupt you like that. You're a very dear person, and so I apologize for that. But it's personal awareness, Paul.
Mm.
Right?
Mm.
Isn't it? I mean, anything that we come across that may be a mirroring of something that reminds us of something that has deeper meaning to it that we have yet to become aware or rediscover within ourselves, whatever it may be. That's the reason why I'm saying if you're listening to what I'm saying or whatever you're hearing anything that you hear through other people and whatever is being communicated that sparks that with you, my recommendation for this is to do this if you can. Don't listen to anything else. until you actually start to engage with that spark, that
Mm.
awareness within you. Let it grow, let it develop. There's a tendency and there's a programming within this digital online cyber cubicle experience and how it relates biologically with the body and the release of dopamine and everything, because getting likes and just, sharing pictures and all this stuff,
Mm.
it's very addicting. Okay. In which what ends up doing it, taking you away from the bigger picture that you need to be finding out for yourself,
Yeah.
which is this internal understanding of knowing that there's more to know than what you think you know. You can
Absolutely.
feel it. I don't know about everybody else. I'll just say for myself, for the longest time, I felt it in my very core, just like this nervousness, like you have just before you go to the dentist.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah.
When I
Yeah.
was young, I carried this with me in this entire incarnation. I really didn't understand what it was until much later, what it actually was.
Mm.
It wasn't fear. It was this being denied of who and what I really am within my very core,
Yeah.
that I'm eagerly looking to release and be free. This is a slave body. This is bondage here.
Mm.
Fucking bondage. Okay. This reminds me of a particular, I was for a while there. I was, I kind of, we have a tendency to direct ourselves if we allow that to happen. The internal directing of oneself, and things start crossing your path, which you orchestrated to cross your path.
Mm.
You know what I mean? And so I was looking at NDE experiences from an observational point of view, just observing, like I've been doing for a very, very, very long time.
Mm.
And just like I had mentioned earlier, certain things might be said and everybody else around me won't get it, but I'm going and I'm locking in on that one thing because it's part of my bigger puzzle that I've been creating for myself,
Yeah.
that I've been formulating. And so I'm listening to these different NDE experiences and I'm going, that's bogus. That's bogus. That's a program. I start seeing all this bullshit.
Mm.
And then occasionally I would see something that was real. I'm going, that's real. And one of those instances was, this was a gentleman that he had, within his later teens, moved from the East Coast to the West Coast, and under false pretenses that there was a job there waiting and all this other stuff, and it turned into a big hassle, and
Mm.
nothing turned out the way that it was intended or promised or whatever. And so this person was, they're them and somebody else that was involved, um, couldn't they couldn't eat. So they hadn't eaten for like a week, you know. And I know how that is. You get pretty hungry after a while.
Yeah.
And so um, they decided, well, I'm going to go give blood so we can get something to eat, right? But you go there and they'll tell you, well, if you haven't eaten for this certain period of time, you can't give blood.
Yeah.
Okay. And they, of course, lied about it, you know. And so he gave blood and he died.
Oh.
Okay. All right. The body died. All
Yeah.
right. Here's the interesting thing. As soon as the body died, his spirit said, I'm free. And it reintegrated with who it is on a collective consciousness level, which was in
Mm.
this state of neutrality, seeing and perceiving all things. That was real. How did he sneak past that? Here's the way that I think why that this happened this way. Because he was in a state of complete denial of the body. He was denying the body. And what this is in context, this would be also be in context when I was talking about your spirit song and developing your spirit song, needing the fast,
Mm.
because you're denying the body. When you deny your body that long, or can, not always, what this does, it eliminates a lot of the attachments and everything here. There's a disconnect that you have going on here.
Mm.
And it disconnects and it disconnects and disconnects. So you're walking more in your essence and more and more and more within your essence. The body's, you know, it's diminishing and diminishing in its control and it's the magnetized hold that it has. Okay.
Mm.
So this is why I see this individual is at their peak and they're still young yet. You know, a lot of crap happens within the body for a long period of time. You know, that's one of the reasons why within these outer worlds it's dangerous to live for a very long time. Really,
Mm.
it starts to really twist your consciousness, or can do that. We can see evidence of that everywhere we look. All
Yeah.
right. So, long story short, is that he was able to go immediately because he heard in the body, he heard him, the essence of himself, say, "I'm free." What does that mean? You weren't free when you were here.
Yeah.
You were in bondage.
Yeah.
You were
True.
imprisoned. Now I'm free. And
Yeah.
it was true freedom because what did it do? It went, you reintegrated directly back
Into.
to where it was. There was
Yeah.
enough memory and awareness in regard to the connection energetically to where he connected back to himself in a collective.
Yeah.
And then he perceived everything based on knowing all things within that state of being in a sense of neutrality. And I go,
Wow.
that one's real. And
That's.
out of all the ones that I've listened to, probably less than 3%. That would be great. Well,
Wow.
everybody, we're going to say goodbye and we're going to stop the recording right at this
Oh yeah.
point. And we'll see you soon.
Great to
Thanks.
see you, Randy. Thank you so much.
Thanks.